Uh, First of all, welcome, Bob Marley, and welcome, CFC Hard. Much appreciated. And also thank you for the kind words. Super grateful. And yeah, welcome to anyone tuning in or re-tuning in from the workout stream. So I had a great stream earlier today. Stream my workout. Always great. And you know, I know I'm probably gonna jinx myself, but I really feel like the handstands are really coming along, and like I'm hoping it's just a matter of maybe a couple more weeks of me actually like mastering them. Since I think I got in at least 3 or 4 times, a good like 20 second, 30 second hold. And yeah, totally a paper on like literally spotting at the bench press, so it might seem obvious to some people of like, and maybe someone would question of like, should we even research on whether, spotting is beneficial? But, as a scientist, I think just about virtually everything is a legitimate scientific question that is open for inquiry. Whether you can actually do the research or carry it out is a different story. But in terms of just like asking the question, I think virtually everything is a valid and legitimate scientific question. But it's not always realistic carry out every single research question, and also not every single research question is, let's say, in the ethical domain, and I always put ethics and morality above the science and the research. And thank you so much for the kind words, CFC Mud. I don't take that for granted, and absolutely, I do want to bring in some positivity as much as possible. And so yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you so much for those kind words. I don't know what to say other than like I don't take that for granted at all. So, and Bob Marley, I totally understand and take your point that it's a weird question in terms of like, I think most people just based off of intuition, that, it's just like self-evident that, spotting would be beneficial. But is it? But, I think there are countless examples in scientific history where, we had our initial intuitions of like, oh, this is self-evident. And yet when we And when we put it to the scientific test, like, turns out we're wrong. Actually, I think one of the best examples, or a really good example, even related to health and fitness, is stretching. So there was a time, okay, let's say 15, 20 years ago, like when I was, in high school, going to gym class, we would always go through stretching before doing a workout, before doing any activity. We would always partake and engage in static stretching. Sort of the type of stretching where, you get into position and you hold it for a good 20, 30 seconds. Because, and there are still people today that believe this, of just like, well, if you stretch before working out or doing any type of activity, specifically like static stretching, that'll reduce your rate of injury. And you'll perform better if you warm up with static stretching. And the research, I think so far since then, has like come pretty clear that at least when it comes to static stretching, and weight training and strength training, you should pretty much should not do any sort of static stretching before strength training, or even arguably before just about most types of activity, I would say. And even the research on static stretching specifically is really not that great or robust. Where it's again, going back 20, 30 years, we were just operating under the principle of oh, it's self-evident that, static stretching before a workout, any type of workout, is just going to reduce the rate of injury. When actually put to the scientific test, the benefits of static stretching are marginal at best, and it definitely depends on when you do your static stretching in a workout. And Desolate Mirror, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Always appreciated. And well, so I know stretching is a touchy topic. And as someone who has done quite a bit of yoga in their lifetime, there's totally a time and place for stretching. And as someone who preaches, about mobility and flexibility, totally there's a value in stretching. But it needs to be done, needs to be dosed appropriately, and dosed at the appropriate time is definitely pretty critical. But I guess we'll just dive into the research. But yeah, it was a great workout stream earlier today. Well, it always is, but today felt particularly good. Especially I really do feel I'm coming along with the handstands, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, by summertime, I can actually start moving on to getting down the handstand push-up. That is the next goal. So I'll cover this brief article before getting into the main topics. We're going to start first with that research on spotting, because it's always, even though it might be self-evident, even though it might be obvious, I think it's always good to have the evidence to back up what you say. And as someone who always tries to be evidence-based, I will pretty much always put in the effort, follow the evidence where it leads. Well, thank you well, let's just say I haven't mastered them yet. I feel like I'm close, but, we'll see. Until I actually, master it, I'm not going to make the claim that I can actually, do a handstand. Or I'll let the audience decide. But yeah, briefly covering this, and, I talk about sleep a lot. I also complain about sleep a moderate amount. Can we speak on healthy calorie? Absolutely. You can totally, have Ask Me Anything in the stream title for a reason. If you want to ask, I definitely can't guarantee that I can answer every single question. But you can totally ask, and if you want to speak about it, we totally can. So, I think everyone, at least at this point, understands the importance of sleep, not only just for your daily functioning, but also on the topic of health and fitness. When it comes to progress in the gym and gaining strength, totally, sleep is critical. The research is also pretty robust on that. Actual real recovery, a lot of it takes place during sleep, and also supplying your body with the appropriate nutrients, vitamins, proteins, etc., etc. But just like with anything, what is the right balance? And also, what should you prioritize? Is it just length of sleep, or is a solid good 5 quality hours better than 7 hours of broken sleep? I definitely sometimes struggle with broken sleep. I don't usually have a lot of trouble falling asleep. It's more the staying asleep that I struggle with. Yeah, I hear you. My sleep is very rarely like bad, but it's always like more or less like mediocre, good or passing at best. So sleep quality is more important for the quality of life than sleep duration or social jet lag, a new Czech study suggests. To date, little research has explored the long-term effects of changes in sleep length or sleep quality on quality of life, right? And this appears to be specifically addressing quality of life, not really addressing sort of like the broader, scope of like, good for, let's say, brain function or cognitive performance. They found that individuals who experience higher quality sleep also have greater satisfaction with life, more well-being, feel healthier, perceive less work stress, and are happier. So these are all almost certainly, subjective self-report measures. I mean, this study is linked right here, so I can actually probably just click on it. I was kind of like too busy researching other things for the stream. But we'll just get through this. And I'm probably not going to dissect this study here. I want to get to the main topics. So Chechen scientists say that sleep quality plays a greater role in influencing the quality of life than sleep duration or timing. Their study, published in the open access journal, Public Library of Science 1, and this is a pretty well-regarded, respected journal, and open access. One of the, let's say, few, high quality, close to the top journals that is open access. I should really get a sleep study. I'm working out hard. So you are absolutely correct, Desolate Mirror. And I'm not just saying that, from based off of the research. I also say that, like from my own personal experience. This is one of the reasons why I am prone to overtraining. And I've covered quite a bit of the research on overtraining, where, overtraining for me, doesn't come from the intense training sessions that I do. It's more like I don't have enough recovery and rest incorporated into my programming. And I definitely know better, like for sure. And totally, for me, one of the earliest signs that I'm getting into overtraining territory, as I mentioned before, like just my sleep goes out the window. I get terrible insomnia, and then even when I do eventually fall asleep, I get just like the most broken sleep. It is also the first study to test how social jet lag, a mismatch of internal sleep rhythms and environmental demands, may affect quality of life. Lead authors, Michaela, definitely not going to attempt to pronounce that, Charles University faculty, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, Czech Academy of Sciences. While when we sleep and how long we sleep is important, individuals who have better quality sleep also have a better quality of life, regardless of the time and length of sleep. In addition, by following about 4,500 people for 3 years, we found that those whose sleep improved also had an improved quality of life, which, that is, let's say, not surprising and is probably self-evident, but again, always good to have the research to back it up. Previous studies have shown that sleep disruptions and low quality sleep may decrease the quality of life. I'm hoping, Desolate, that if you want to get a sleep study done, that you actually can. I know that depending on where you are, getting a sleep study done, not exactly the easiest thing to get access to. and very often, yeah, getting medical care for like your sleep, uh, very often an unmet need, or at least in my experience, not the easiest thing to get medical care for. The Charles University researchers define the quality of life as an interplay between the perception of an internal state, such as the experience of happiness or feeling of good health or satisfaction, and external events in the surrounding environment, which may include family and career. They base their analysis on the parameters of well-being, satisfaction with life, happiness, and meaning in life. And it's interesting, and this has certainly happened with other, let's say, psychological research, of like they're separating out these concepts of like well-being versus satisfaction with life, which many people I think would put those things as like synonymous, as in like if you have a high satisfaction with life and you have high well-being, but these do appear to be kind of like distinct psychological concepts. So what is social jet lag? Social jet lag is a term that describes the difference between biological time, determined by internal circadian rhythms, and social times, primarily determined by the external environment. The increasing use of artificial light and night work is largely responsible for this pervasive circadian misalignment. Considering that the circadian clock regulates a host of physiological processes, health experts have linked social jet lag with negative health outcomes. These include poor sleep, hypertension, impaired cognitive performance, mental health conditions, and metabolic disorders. I'm like, yeah, this is also my understanding based off of the research, where if you are sort of out of sync or out of tune with your own circadian clock or rhythm, you're pretty much at increased risk for a number of negative outcomes. And you unfortunately see this with like shift workers, or those who work overnight jobs. You certainly see this with medical professionals that are very often working like 16 24-hour shifts or longer, or like they're working like through the night and they're sleeping through the day, types of thing. There does appear to be kind of like a greater risk of negative health outcomes when like your daily activities are like out of sync with your internal circadian rhythm. Data on sleep quality, duration, bedtime. The Charles University team consulted data from the Czech Household Panel study, focusing on information collected over 3 years. And also Bob Marley. Maybe that's something you might want to keep in mind in terms of, following your, as best as you can, or as we can. Like, I definitely probably, I'm not like perfectly in sync with my circadian rhythm or my, internal circadian clock. The survey interviewed all members of the sampled households. In each wave of data collection, the same members of the same households were asked to contribute. Czech adults submitted a total of about 5,000 self-administered questionnaires about sleep patterns, health, and work in 2018. Responses totaled 2,000 in 2019 and about 2,100 questionnaires in 2020. That's where, oh yeah, 100%. Not surprising at all. Like I've definitely been, I've had, windows of my life where I was totally out of sync. Any sort of semblance of normal circadian rhythm. Somewhat living the lifestyle of like being a shift worker, of like working overnight and sleeping during the day, when I wasn't actually, a shift worker. The drop in the sample between 2018 and 2019 was due to a blood draw requirement. Not surprising. The experts studied the effect of sleep on the dependent quality of life variables described earlier. For instance, they measured life satisfaction according to responses to the question, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole? They gauged perceived happiness with responses to the question, taking all things together, how happy would you say you are? Additionally, the study measured sleep duration, perceived sleep quality, and social jet lag. Sleep duration was calculated according to the reported responses regarding sleep and wake times on workdays and free days. Perceived quality of sleep was based on answers to the question, how would you rate the quality of your sleep? The researchers calculated social jet lag as the difference between the mid-sleep time on free days and work days. Individual and household sleep patterns to evaluate their hypotheses on the effects of sleep aspects on quality of life. The Charles University team repeatedly measured the CHPS data within both individuals and household. So this CHPS, that's like the Czech health. I referred to it earlier. Yeah, the Czech household panel stuff. They found that social jet lag and sleep duration were important in explaining differences in quality of life between different people. So this is essentially, it's a correlational study, or, an association study. It's not some, prospective randomized controlled trial. They're basically just, kind of like mining data from questionnaires and, correlating it or associating it with, whatever measures that they're interested in. So, this is not causative, and this is not, 100% conclusive that, poor sleep leads to, a lower quality of life. Although, again, I think that's intuitive for most people. Social jet lag was linked to lower life satisfaction and higher work stress, whilst longer sleep duration was associated with lower levels of happiness and worse subjective health. However, higher sleep quality was the most important variable, as it was associated with better outcomes across all the indicators of quality of life, greater life satisfaction, more well-being, higher happiness, better subjective health, and less work stress. Yo, April, welcome back, I should say. Thank you so much for passing by again. Super appreciate it. I hope you're continuing to have a fantastic day. And almost like perfect timing, right? If I remember correctly, you got a great night's sleep. And I'm literally covering this article here about research about sleep and sleep quality. And it seems like, at least based off of this study, but this is one study that's just correlational, maybe quality matters more than quantity. So when they looked at changes within individuals during the study duration, rather than comparing different people, again, sleep quality was the most important variable. Changes in a person's sleep duration or social jet lag do not affect their quality of life measures. Contrastingly, improvements in the quality of sleep were associated with increased life satisfaction, well-being, happiness, and subjective health. This is in agreement with previous research that suggests sleep quality is a strong predictor of quality of life. But, to wrap it up, always good to point out, strengths and limitations of any study. So Medical News Today, which is, the website that is publishing this article, discussed this study with David Cutler, a family medicine physician at Providence St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, California, not involved in the work. So it's just, a consulting medical professional. Dr. Cutler told Medical News Today that the findings were important, but their shortcomings made him hesitant to draw definitive conclusions, which, that makes sense. Like I said, this appears to be just kind of like a correlative or association study. So again, they're not teasing out causation. So there's likely a whole bunch of other confounding variables. Since all data was collected from one country, you may not be able to generalize the conclusions to all countries, and data were collected during the longer summer months, so the results may not apply to the entire year. Results were self-reported, those subject to reporting bias, and since not all questionnaires were returned, selection bias may also apply. All great points. Dr. Cutler also mentioned that the study did not clarify causality. Right, I would say that's probably the biggest drawback, or kind of like fundamental flaw in the study. It would also be interesting to study 100%, and that's where it'll get tricky, right? Because sleep aids, that's a very broad category, right? From benzodiazepines to like melatonin to meditation to whatever. Warm milk, is warm milk a sleep aid? That is whatever. That's one of the traditional sleep aids, right? The study's authors also acknowledge that causes of social jet lag rarely change, though their research timeframe may not have been long enough to observe any potential effect. And also, I think more and more these days, people are using cannabis as a sleep aid, which, no judgment on my part. As I said before, any sleep is better than no sleep, almost certainly. But I think there is potential concern there that cannabis may help you in falling asleep and staying asleep, but there appears to be some evidence, at least the last time that I looked, that sleep, let's say, brought on by cannabis, does not necessarily, or doesn't look like it brings upon kind of like that restful, rapid eye movement type of sleep that, is really supposed to ideally result in you waking up feeling rested and refreshed. But again, any sleep is better than no sleep. Where, if I were suffering from insomnia really badly, I would, and I knew that, cannabis would help me fall asleep, I would totally take it. Some of the results may have been affected by the COVID pandemic in the spring of 2020. Consequently, the study might not show sleep patterns under typical circumstances. Tips for better sleep. So this just seems like outside of the scope of the article, but still good to go over, coming from a doctor. Stick to a consistent sleep schedule. I think that's pretty intuitive to most people. Create a bedtime routine. Yeah. Establishing a relaxing routine before bedtime. This could include taking a warm bath or shower, reading a book, or listening to calming music. Comfortable in a sleep environment. Yeah. That appears to be kind of like the overall general recommendation. And also that only use your bed for, sleeping and or sex. Don't eat in bed. Ideally, don't watch TV in bed. Don't study or, do your work from bed. Where, you generally want to like condition your brain or habituate your brain of like, once you're in bed, this is whatever sleep time or sex time or whatever sleep after sex time. Exposure to screens, limit that. I think everybody knows that by now. Avoiding caffeine, nicotine, alcohol. Exercise regularly. Manage stress. Yeah. And lastly, consider seeking medical advice. I think most people know these by now. I think the challenge is, actually implementing them. Is a medical doctor sufficiently qualified? That is a valid question. Where, yeah, that's where it's tricky, right? Because they're a family medicine physician. And, not to knock family medicine physicians, or any physician, or any medical professional. But, it's understandably difficult to get, like, an expert to talk about, whatever topic it is that you're covering. Where, even though definitely not every doctor, in my experience, has the most rigorous scientific training, and I've totally encountered doctors pretty surprisingly having very little education when it comes to, like, scientific methodology and rigor. This is not to say that, they're bad doctors or anything like that. And, kind of like technically speaking, there's totally a difference between, being a clinician and seeing patients and prescribing treatments versus being a researcher. Very often, clinician and researcher overlaps. The specialist that I go to, the gastroenterologist, they are absolutely a clinician, but they are also a researcher. And they, actually fairly often recruit me for their own research studies. But totally, that is a legit question to ask, whether this person is qualified. Or like if they're in the best position to actually point out the flaws in the study, or the drawbacks, or the strengths. Anyways, it doesn't increase or decrease my REM. I get very good quality deep sleep from... yeah, exactly. I totally respect and understand that sentiment of anything I can get. That is actually pretty much my guiding principle as well. I don't know how much my doctor would know about correlational studies. My guess is that you probably would. That's the thing. And obviously, medical school medical standards, vary a lot region by region. But I know, at least from what I can tell, from, let's say, the medical schools in North America, medical training, or going to medical school in North America, there is a little bit of like get some training, like the research aspect, but it doesn't seem to be that much in depthly. But I guess just like any sleep is better than no sleep, maybe any doctor, any consulting doctor is better than no consult whatsoever, right? These are tricky things. So yeah, now starting with the main topics, with topic number 1. Even though, the title is giving it away, but this is a research question. This is a valid and legitimate research question. And I also think, okay, one of the reasons why I want to cover this, why I think it's interesting, outside of just spotting, I think it has broader kind of like psychological implications. Because, as you are probably going to see, this improvement in bench press performance in the presence of a spotter seems to be kind of like psychologically driven. And I think that's super interesting. As someone who covers a lot of psychological research, I think it says something about kind of like overall broad psychological behavior, or like what are kind of like more ideal or optimal conditions for human performance or human well-being overall. And this is a deception study. So I'm gonna expand on it as we go through it, but I think it says something in terms of like what do we as humans kind of like maybe not need, but want, what's more ideal and optimal for our overall well-being, of like maybe spotting shouldn't be just exclusive to the gym. Maybe there's something to be said for having a spotter outside the gym, or what does a spotter outside the gym actually look like. I want the good REM sleep 100%. Believe me, I understand your frustration for sure. Because like I don't actually know whether I myself am getting deep REM sleep, and I totally have the experience of like I slept a lot, or I slept a good amount for me, and yet I still kind of like wake up tired or exhausted. Or like I still feel like I'm crashing in the middle of the day. Well, I don't want to spoil it, although it's kind of alluded to in the title. Hey, I don't think you're far off. So, sorry. Resistance exercise forms a considerable proportion of training loads for athletes and is increasingly prescribed by health professionals for recreational gym users. The popularity of resistance exercise is also increasing because of the visible physical benefits such as weight loss, increased muscle mass, and increased self-esteem. And I think it's, another variable at play is, social media and fitness influencers. I think more and more, I don't actually know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I have mixed feelings about it. As much as I advocate for fitness and health, and as much as, I definitely want people to incorporate movement and physical activity into their life. But let's just say you're a stereotypical fitness influencer. I don't know if they're like the best positive influence on people. These beneficial adaptations are also linked to reduced visceral fat and increased insulin sensitivity. Such benefits have also shifted perceptions of the effectiveness of resistance exercise as a prescribed activity for the treatment and prevention of some non-communicable diseases and for athletic training. And totally, in the past kind of like 15, 20 years, like obviously, I'm a little bit older, maybe a lot bit older. But, as I was growing up, it was all about cardio. Where, basically pretty much any exercise, let's say in the mid-90s, or pretty much like all throughout the 90s, it was all about cardio. Where, pretty much going to the gym basically meant doing cardio. And it's only, let's say, in the past, like, 15 years or so, 10, 15 years, that, like, it seems like strength training and weight training has really taken off. And, things like bodybuilding, powerlifting, have really taken off. Where I think things like Mr. Olympia, I don't think they're truly mainstream now, but I think they're way more mainstream than they were, about 20 years ago. Or going back to the 90s, that's more than 20. Shows where my brain is. More than 20 years ago, like 25 years ago. Where, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, everyone knows, like, him as a bodybuilder. But I think more and more, it seems like bodybuilders are kind of like becoming more and more popularized and more well-known to the general public. Well, thank you. I actually don't take that for granted, either. Yeah, actually, I think that's a super kind thing to say. I prefer to stay away from all fitness influencers. I don't blame you. The fitness influencer, whatever landscape, I think, really super toxic. Oh yeah, 100%. And I think, unfortunately, that sentiment still lingers around today. I think it's much less so, or maybe not much, but it's at least less so today. But there's still kind of like a little bit of that prevailing notion of, like, if you just touch a dumbbell, you're just gonna turn into some ultra muscular masculine person. And the same thing goes in the opposite direction. Of, like, many people who are into bodybuilding and strength training, they think if they just, like, touch a treadmill, all their muscles are going to evaporate, and they're just going to lose all their strength overnight if they do just, like, one single round of cardio. Like, no, that's actually not the case. You can do cardio, and build muscle and retain your muscle. Where was I? Yes. Training adaptation goals, such as increasing muscular strength, power, endurance, and hypertrophy, require different training methods. The training outcome requires specific volume, intensity, and rest periods to bring about the desired skeletal muscle response. Increased evidence for the efficacy of resistance exercise for both health and sport performance has prompted an increase in research interest that has sought to investigate methods of further enhancing these beneficial training adaptations and performance. Several studies have attempted to investigate the effects of the social interaction during resistance training programs. Right, and as we've touched upon before, there's totally a social aspect, or there definitely can be when it comes to working out, especially when it comes to group fitness, sports, group sports, and totally, some people love working out or doing weight training in a group of people, or having a workout partner. For some people, that's almost like their sole source of motivation. Like, if they don't have a workout partner, or if there's not this social aspect, then they really struggle to work it on their own. So I think the social aspect is very often overlooked. Indeed, social facilitation and the presence of training partners, coaches, or personal trainers have previously been shown to improve strength and power after 12-week training programs. This has led to the commonly held belief that adherence and enjoyment of resistance exercise may be improved in more social situations, especially in less well-trained populations. In diabetic patients prescribed resistance exercise, the presence of additional individuals in the exercise environment has been shown to be facilitative. Conversely, In other types of exercise, such as individual endurance activities, the use of social situation effects has been shown to have no influence on self-determined running duration, speed, or post-exercise ratings of perceived exertion, or RPE, that I think most people are aware of these days, at least, if you do some strength training during recreational running. Interestingly, however, when a competitor is present during time trial cycling, performance improvements have been observed as a result of external attentional focus mediated reductions in perceptions of effort. Where, this, I think just about everyone knows, at least anybody that uses it, the RPE, like that's a subjective scale, right? It's literally, in the terminology, rating of perceived exertion. So it's like, how do you feel the effort is? And it's totally interesting how kind of like your RPE and, obviously not just be affected by you and, your subjective state and how you feel, but also your external environment, as they're alluding to here. Even just like the presence of a competitor seems to reduce the RPE. And there's some interesting research that I'll probably cover at some point of the effects of music during exercise. And that also appears to be kind of one of the moderating variables of for some people, or I would say for quite a few people, working out to music kind of can reduce your rating of perceived exertion of with the music, things just seem easy, or you feel more motivated, or you feel stronger, or that you could run faster or longer. And totally, I obviously, as you see on stream, I incorporate music into my workouts. I incorporate music while I'm running. Furthermore, the presence of a teammate avatar within a virtual exercise environment facilitated self-paced rowing in female exercisers, suggesting that some individuals might feel additional pressure to seem skillful and competent in the presence of others, and so perform better. At present, it is unclear whether such acute changes to performance occur during resistance exercise activities, when the social situation is manipulated. Strength and conditioning training requires significant mental effort, characteristics of which influence movement quality and quantity, and therefore related physiological adaptations. One such variable that drives effective physical effort is self-efficacy. Bandura's self-efficacy theory suggests that self-judgment of personal capability has a critical influence on goal-directed behavior. Importantly, in training settings, one's self-efficacy influences both the amount of effort and the length of time that effort is invested. Furthermore, self-efficacy is a state variable that fluctuates in accordance with changing perceptions of the self, the task, and environment. Accordingly, Ria et al. Showed that one repetition maximum, or 1 rep maxes, bench press performance was improved by about 13% when participants underwent the test in the presence of an audience of spectators. So if they know that they're on display, you have this pretty significant boost in performance. This is over 10%. That's the difference. That's benching 100 pounds, that's an added 10 pounds on your 100-pound bench press. Music or friends, what should you... Honestly, it depends. Obviously, if it's a day that I'm looking to... It might sound counterintuitive, and it actually might go against what this research is going to say. But if I'm looking let's say, attempt a PR, or achieve a new 1 rep max, I would choose music. But totally, if let's say I'm feeling a little bit tired, and I'm not looking to really perform in the gym, I would totally choose some friends. Not just anyone from my circle of friends. But I have a select few of friends that I would choose to work out with, depending on the day. But totally, if it's, for example, running on a treadmill, I would totally 100% choose music over like running with a friend. That is for certain. The employment of such social facilitation effects may have important implications for training impulse and exercise adherence. Although the presence of an audience during a competitive situation seems to improve resistance exercise performance, it remains unclear whether the proximity of a small number of individuals has similar effects. Right. So like, kind of like, what is the minimum audience that you need to improve performance? Where's the threshold of crowd? Of like, if you have, a stadium filled with people, or like a stadium filled with one person, do you still see that same performance benefit? This is important because most training sessions take place in either solo situations or in the presence of a few training partners or spotters. Currently, little is known about the effects of a spotter presence on the individual performing the exercise. However, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, or NSCA, the NSCA, they are the organization that publishes this journal. This is the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. Yeah. So the NSCA, this is their journal. And the NSCA is where I was formally certified through as a trainer. Where was I? And pretty much the reason why I chose to be certified through them is because they publish a scientific journal, and they are essentially evidence-based. Well, they publish evidence. Well, yeah, recommends, blah, blah, blah. So, Wise et al. Demonstrated that exercise trainers could influence the self-efficacy of novice female exercisers to complete bench press exercise through highlighting their professional qualifications, providing specific feedback, and communicating beliefs about the exerciser's ability. Despite the important role of exercise trainers in instructing and supporting exercisers, less is known of their additional role within the strength training environment acting as a spotter. It is possible that the spotter not only has a social facilitating effect on performance, but also supports self-efficacy through behaviors explicitly highlighting their beliefs in the exerciser's ability to complete exercise movements. Right, so, I think everyone kind of like self-evidently or obviously understands the value of trainers, coaches, instructors, in terms of like informing the person, right? Of like, this is how you do it, or this is how you optimize the movement, etc., etc. But maybe there's another additional benefit in terms of like, again, just a psychological benefit, as they're alluding to here. Supports self-efficacy, kind of like not how powerful, but kind of like how much agency you feel you have to execute something, kind of like the belief in yourself that you can do something and actually execute. And self-efficacy totally appears to be kind of like a variable when it comes to like confidence, self-esteem. Generally speaking, those who score higher on self-efficacy, they tend to have higher self-esteem, or like vice versa. I don't know which one is like sort of the cause and effect, or how specifically they're associated. It could just be like as a result of higher self-esteem, have higher self-efficacy. But I do think, if I remember from the research correctly, like one of the ways to like boost your self-esteem is through like boosting your where was I? Yeah. Conversely, the lack of any active intervention from the spotter may also influence self-efficacy. Therefore, the aim of the study was to determine the effect of the presence of spotters on performance and the psychophysiological responses during bench press exercise. It was hypothesized that the visual presence of spotters would lead to improved performance because of increased desire to perform, mediated by associated social facilitation effects. Right, so it looks like sort of like an audience effect of like, hey, maybe just by the mere fact that someone is watching, someone might be more willing to push themselves. They do cover that. I'm pretty much gonna go through this study from beginning to end. Where, I highlighted here that this is an all-male sample population. And I do believe that they were pretty much a higher level of training. An experimental design consisting of 3 laboratory visits was used. After the initial determination of 1 rep max, 2 subsequent experimental trials performed in a randomized crossover manner were used. During the experimental trials, sets of bench press exercise to failure were performed, during which participants' awareness of the presence of spotters was manipulated. So like, yeah, awareness of the spotter, that's why it's in the title. This is a deception study. The chosen method to achieve this was through a deceptive approach, whereby in one of the trials, spotters were openly present and visible to the participants' spotter, whereas in the other trial, they remained present but hidden from view, deception. During the exercise bouts, dependent variables of performance, perceptions of effort, self-efficacy, and blood lactate were measured. So 12 recreationally trained male participants were recruited for this study. I guess, without getting too bogged down of what higher level. So, I mean, these are recreational trained. So these are not professional athletes. They're not, I would say they're like higher level, but they're not elite level. Where like they're really training to perform in an activity or in a competition. It's more like, I'm technically a recreational trained male, right? Since I'm not training to compete in anything. Plus, there's, I don't know, some sort of handstand competition coming up. But I don't think I'm, I don't think I'm in a poor physical fitness state. Kind of like, recreational is like a very broad category. Pretty much like just about anybody that, they're not a competitor, they're not a professional, and they're not completely sedentary. Yeah, but you don't know, like, their starting point, right? For all you know, they started at, unable to bench press 85 kilograms. Or rather, they can only bench press, like, whatever, 10 kilograms. All participants gave written informed consent before any data collection and then underwent pre-exercise medical screening. So, like, yeah, this is 12 recreational trained, have, like, allergies or something. Male participants. So, this is something to keep in mind. That, it's all male, and it's a small sample size. There are some clear limitations in this study. Of, like, you can only extrapolate so far. But still, I would say has value. Participants had experience of resistance training for a minimum of 12 months and were training about 5 times per week, give or take. The participants were all injury-free for the past 6 months. Of low health risk, and data collection took place between January and March in the Northern Hemisphere. The study was approved by the local Department of Sport and Physical Activity Research Ethics Committee of Edge Hill University. The true deceptive nature and aim of the study was kept hidden from the participants. So, they're essentially lying. Participants were initially told that the aim of the study was to assess the retest reliability of the lifting protocol. After the completion of data collection, all participants were fully debriefed as to the true nature of the experiment. So, procedure. Before the start of data collection, participants were told to avoid ingesting food within 2 hours of exercise and pre-workout supplements. They were also instructed to limit caffeine consumption and to ensure that they were adequately hydrated by consuming at least 1 liter of water in the 2 to 4 hours before testing to reduce the negative impact of dehydration on resistance exercise performance. So they're trying to, control for as many variables, kind of like as realistically possible, right? And going back to what we just covered before this, ideally, you'd want to control for sleep too, right? But that's a more tricky thing to control for. You probably could not make the prescription of like, hey, make sure, as you're participating in the study, that you're getting at least 7 hours of sleep per night. Oh, how are you going to enforce that? I know this is the tricky part of designing and running studies like this. Of like, how do you select the appropriate sample population? Because, that's what matters. Especially if you're trying to make recommendations to like the general public. Well, if you're looking to make recommendations for the general public, then your sample population should probably not be like elite level athletes or professional athletes. If you're just trying to make just general health recommendations, it's you want to kind of like pull from that same sample population. But like, what's the cutoff, right? You want to take like true beginners, or like, again, I'm technically recreational, but I think I would be clearly different with my level and experience of training than someone who has just been training for like 1 or 2 years. So like recreational is a very, very big umbrella that captures a lot of people. But they have their cutoff of like, at least a year, and like, a year pretty consistently, kind of like 4 to 5 times per week. Whereas, so like they literally might have someone, one person, like they've been training for 13 months, and for the past like 13 months, they've been going like 5 times a week. And I would fit in that same category of recreational. I've been training for like over 15 years, and I go at least like 6 times per week. Where was it? Isn't a spotter always preferable due to safety? Yeah. For sure. But that's the thing. So this is why I would say it's a valid scientific question, a research question. Well, just like I think virtually anyone is. But it's an open question of like, safety aside, wouldn't you want to know if a spotter is reducing your performance? You might think it's obvious that a spotter improves your performance. I would say that not obvious. It can totally, I would say, realistic in my mind. That if I have a spotter, I don't need to like work as hard. I can get my buddy, complete the rep for me or help me complete the rep. I could have my spotter do half of the work. Participants were required to replicate this regimen on all subsequent laboratory visits using a 24-hour diet diary. During the first laboratory visit, all participants underwent body composition analysis using air displacement plethysmography. I actually not super familiar with this word, but yeah, I know BODPOD. Immediately after this, the participants were required to demonstrate a safe, unloaded bench press on a Smith machine. So again, this is another thing to keep in mind. This is not a free barbell bench press on a Smith machine. Participants then completed a 4-minute warm-up of low-intensity cycling against no additional resistance, maintaining a speed of about 70 RPM. 2 sets of 10-second hold upper body stretching were completed of the chest, shoulders, and triceps muscle groups. To ensure consistent performances, and despite the participants being experienced, coaching points devised by the NSCA were given during the warm-up before any testing. Bench press 1 rep max was then determined using the protocol standardized by the NSCA, which is widely used to measure maximal strength. This involved the performance of a 12 repetition warm-up set at 10% of estimated 1 rep max on the Smith machine. And they're giving the brand of the company that makes the Smith machine. I am human, unfortunately. As much as sometimes I wish I were not, I'm indeed human. On completion of the initial set, participants then rested for 1 minute before performing a 6 repetition set with an additional 20% load. So, they're going through a pretty solid warm-up, but, this is standard by NSCA, kind of like guidelines or recommendations. This is bringing back some memories. Then after a further 2-minute rest period, a final warm-up set of 3 repetitions with an estimated near maximal load added was completed. An estimation of the 1 rep max was then made, and participants were allowed to attempt single lifts. If they were successful, 1.25, 2.5, or 5 kilogram was progressively added to the bar to determine the actual 1 rep max. Each lift attempt was completed after a 2 to 4 minute rest, and all 1 rep maximums were determined within 3 to 6 attempts. They're pretty much really trying to go by a standardized way. And this is the regiment to perform the bench press. Warm up for it, and complete it, and execute it. Which makes sense. And one might ask, okay, so they're using a Smith machine, okay? Can you call it bench press if it's on a Smith machine? Some might say no. And that this is where it's pros and cons of for a true bench press, as most people understand it, you would want to use, a free barbell, okay? Where its movement is not restricted. And even then, the research backs it up. That kind of the ideal bar path of the bench press, not straight vertical up and down. So even though using a free-loaded barbell is more realistic, okay, and that's a true bench press, but at the same time, it's a confounding variable, because everyone will perform the movement uniquely, because virtually everyone will have kind of a unique bar path, and their unique way of performing the bench press. And so to control for that variable, they do it on a Smith machine. Because on a Smith machine, the bar path stays the same. And so you are eliminating that variable of altered bar path. You're having everyone do the same form of bench press by restricting the movement of the barbell. So the drawback is it's not realistic to the actual bench press, the free-loaded barbell bench press. But then if you use a free barbell that is, let's say, less scientifically rigorous, because you're just introducing a whole host of variables of the barbell, the bar path is it'll be unique to each lifter. And so to control for that variable of unique form on the bench press, they use a Smith machine. They are basically sacrificing kind of realism for greater scientific rigor. Which, that makes sense. And that's, when it comes to the science, that is the better scientific way to approach it. Just like eliminate that variable, even though it's, not realistic. But spotting with this machine seems almost redundant, so that might be a confounding pair. Yeah, that's also a fair point. Hold on. Yeah, but let's not judge. Or maybe not judge too harshly. Where was I? Yeah. So, the participants were then required to attend the laboratory on 2 further occasions to perform either the spotter trial or the deception trial. In both trials, 2 spotters were present, 1 spotter at either side of the Smith machine bar during lifts. In the spotter trial, their presence was made visually obvious to the participants before and on completion of each set. In the deception trial, spotters remained in place only during the lifts, but not visible to the participants, and then moved to remain hidden from view during the rest periods between sets. This was achieved using opaque material shielding around the Smith machine frame, which was in place during both experimental trials. This allowed the bar and weight plates to move freely, while obscuring the view of the spotters from the participants when needed. Participants were told that the shielding was to reduce the chances of peripheral distractions, and were instructed to focus on a marker, which had been placed on the middle of the bar. During the trials, the same male principal investigator was visible to the participants, and the same male spotters were used for all trials. It's like, the way they're describing it, certainly sounds like a pretty kind of like funky setup. But it does seem like they're beginners. You can't tell me your average guy that's been going to the gym for some time, can you? I think you'd be surprised. Again, and this is absolutely not to throw shade on anybody, or no judgment on anybody. But you would be surprised at how many people go to the gym and go to the gym for a long time. That for kind of like unfortunate reasons, and I would say largely driven by them not consulting with qualified experts, or maybe doing the research themselves. Many people go to the gym a lot and see minimal progress, or like progress at a snail's pace, because pretty much they're just going about it in very suboptimal ways. I can't tell you, unfortunately, how many people I've run into, yeah. I mean, I know this, even from, the gym that I was a member of, for over a decade. As I mentioned many times before, I was a member of the YMCA for like over a decade. And so, I literally knew people, that had been going to that gym for years. And, they would unfortunately not see any progress, because they are very much training in suboptimal ways. And if you train in suboptimal ways, you are going to see like very suboptimal progress. Yeah, unfortunately, there's certainly the aspect of not everyone has access or the financial means to consult with a qualified expert. But there's also the aspect of like, some people, for whatever reason, a multitude of reasons that are complicated, they won't do the research on their own. It's not everyone is as research based as you are. And I would say the people that are actually research based, and they want to go and do their own research and learn about, optimal things, those appear to be few and far between. I can't even tell you, actually, how many people, I've coached and corrected their form. They have come to me saying, oh, they're experienced. They've been lifting for years. They've been squatting for years. And then I go and look at their squat, and it's like, oh my goodness. Like, if if you've been squatting like this for years, I know now why you've like either not made any progress, or I now know why you are saddled with injuries. It's because, like, unfortunately, my heart goes out to these people. That's not a fun thing to go through. But like, yeah, I have totally had to, like, correct the form and technique of, self-proclaimed experienced lifters. Oh, and Slush, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Always happy to see you, and I care. As I said at the beginning of the stream, any question is a good and valid scientific question. And I am going to expand upon this. I'm gonna try and get you to care, Slush, because as I said in before covering this, I think this has broader implications in terms of human psychology. And what is more optimal for human psychology. But we're gonna get to that. So the lifting protocols require participants to complete the same cycling and stretching warm-up outlined before the 1 rep max testing, followed by a set of 10 bench press reps with no weight on the bar to limit the likelihood of injury and attain maximal force output. The participants were then shown the loaded bar and told that this was 60% of their 1 rep max, after which they performed 3 sets of bench press reps to failure at 60% of 1 rep max, unassisted, with 2-minute rest periods between sets. This exercise protocol was chosen because it has previously been shown to have a low test-retest coefficient of variation, and therefore has good reliability, and been previously used to determine performance differences in a similar population. The principal investigator recorded the number of reps in each set and the total weight lifted in each trial. No verbal encouragement was given to the participants. Before each set, the participants received the same scripted verbal instructions. Maintain your visual focus on the bar throughout each set. Think about the movement of the bar, and lift to failure. This was performed to maximize muscular endurance. They're getting very specific verbal coaching. My form is terrific too. I know many people that train in the most goofy way and have the strangest diet. Yeah, without exception. Well, let's also keep in mind, you are a young cohort of people. So what's progress and what's just, adult development, hard to tease out. And totally, progress will likely be exaggerated or bolstered by the fact that, you're still a developing adult. Unless, I don't know your circle of friends, but I suspect they're around your same age. Unless you are working with the elderly, which that's totally fine. I would just not necessarily expect that. I just don't see the relevance of a spotter's effect on performance to any meaningful part of work. Well, that is totally valid. I'm gonna try to make the case of, like, this has implications outside of the gym. Or psychological implications outside of the gym, in my mind. I'm gonna go on my soapbox a little bit. Capillary blood lactate concentrations were measured from the earlobe before the start of each trial and at the end of the 3rd set. Ratings of perceived exertion and the local RPE of the chest and arms were measured after the completion of each set using a 6 to 20 scale. Before the start of sets 1 and 3, rating of self-efficacy to replicate the performance of the previous set during the next set was assessed using a numeric 1 to 10 scale. This was anchored with 1 representing no confidence and 10 representing fully confident. So again, well, it's in the scale. How confident do they subjectively feel? At each measurement point, participants were asked, how confident are you that you will match the previous number of repetitions? Each participant performed the trials with a minimum of 3 days between laboratory visits to minimize the effects of delayed onset muscle soreness, but not more than 7 days apart. Right, so a little bit of a sweet spot. You obviously want to allow for appropriate recovery, but you don't want to have too much time pass that, they start to become deconditioned. So I'm not going to read out this statistical analysis. That's largely boring. And I'm not going to go through all of like their numerical values and the results. We'll get right to the summary of the findings. So, this is the first study to investigate the influence of the presence of spotters on resistance exercise performance using a deceptive strategy. Well, I don't disagree, and I understand why it's probably the most interesting to you. And me skipping it is not a testament to me thinking it's not important. It's totally important. If not, you know, the most important when it comes to data like this. I'm just saying, understandably, to those without economics brain, probably not all that interesting. But, you know, they do, you know, your standard ANOVA analysis of variance. But I would imagine for you, this is all like pretty standard and elementary. So this type of experimental design allowed the presence of the spotters to remain during the exercise trials while obscuring them from the view of the participants. On completion of both trials, during the debriefing process, all participants confirmed that they had been unaware of the true nature of the study and had not detected the spotters during the deception condition. The performance of 3 sets of bench press exercise to failure at 60% of 1 rep max in trained participants was increased by 11%, plus or minus about 8%, for both number of reps and total work when spotters are visible. So it's not only when they are present, but when they are visible. There is I would say, a pretty significant performance boost. You know, essentially about 10%. Interestingly, 11 of the 12 participants performed best in the spotter condition. So what happened to that one outlier? What's going on with that one person? And the participant who did not performed identically in both conditions. So it seems like there was one person who was basically immune to like the psychological effects or the psychological boost of the spotter. No, they don't know that they're present, at least not at the time that they are doing it. They're informed afterwards. They don't know that they're in the deception. So this observed performance improvement occurred independently of a trial order effect, and the percentage improvement of which was larger than the previously observed intertrial reliability, suggesting a significant and measurable improvement when spotters are present. Oh, and Cabadox, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. 20 pillows. In 15 days of pure muscle with the upper lower body split. I don't know if I should. So, well, first of all, what I would say is good on you for having a routine, and it seems like you're sticking to it. That deserves credit. And assuming, okay, that your goal is to get further strength gains and develop, you know, your strength even more, then the question is, if what you are doing now is working, where I think you said with the upper lower body split, so yeah, not the push-pull legs, as in like 4 days a week, you were doing lower upper body split, and that has resulted in your strength gains. And what I would say is that 2.8 kilos, not to let's say burst your bubble, but in 15 days, you almost certainly did not. That's not all muscle, unless you're taking like some really crazy performance enhancer. This is not to say that you haven't made progress. You totally, almost certainly, increase, your strength and your muscles. But that would be like an insane, that would be like an ungodly amount of like your muscle gain that amount of time. But I just want you to be aware that like the weight you're gaining is almost certainly not pure muscle. This is not a bad thing at all. It all depends on what you want. And to address your question, I would say whatever you feel is most sustainable. There's that trade-off of like maybe the 6 days push-pull legs would result in a better strength gains. But, if you don't have the schedule to work out 6 days a week, or like, that's too much training for you, and, it's not sustainable. I'm pretty, I'm not conservative when it comes to my politics. I'm a radical lefty. But I'm sort of somewhat conservative when it comes to like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In terms of like what you're doing now, working out 4 days a week, it seems like you are making good progress. And so until like, you stop making progress, or unless your goals change, I don't see why it's super necessary for you to change the program. Where again, I'd rather you maintain 4 days a week for however long that you want, as opposed to, hey, if you start 6 days per week, and then you burn out after 2 weeks, and that's going to lead to no gains. Yeah, there might be a place for that, with our AI overloads and our robot overlords. I'm sure, the robot spotters are coming. Well, so I understand your point, but generally speaking, there's a very strong correlation and association between, size of the muscle and strength. But the fact that they use Smith machine runes at all, the main part of a spotter is that you can push harder without being scared of failing rather. But with a Smith machine, you can save yourself, meaning, for the most important factor. Yeah, that's fair, but so isn't that a testament? Potentially a testament, to how effective this is, of like, you basically, I agree with you, in the presence of a Smith machine, you have redundant safety, and yet you still see this performance benefit. So maybe you would see even more performance benefit when it's not in a Smith machine, when it's, an actual free barbell bench press, right? Obviously I'm speculating, but that might be the case. Yeah, fair. And again, I absolutely do not want to like downplay the progress. But just be aware, regardless of what the machine, even though it's being measured by a machine, there's a decent amount of error associated with these machines. And if this machine is telling you that you put on 6 pounds of pure muscle in 15 days, I would bet everything that I have that is not what's actually happening. Where was I? Yes. These findings are important. No, I wasn't there. I've lost my spot. I think I was around here. Yes. This observed performance improvement occurred independently of a trial order effect. Yeah, I finished that sentence. Let's see. Furthermore, it would seem that post-set RPE significantly decreased after the first 2 sets, and ratings of self-efficacy were considerably enhanced when spotters were obviously present. So, like, yeah, kind of like, as they explicitly say, they got a boost in self-efficacy, just knowing that the spotters were there, and that you can kind of like visually see them. These findings show the acute effects of the close proximity of a small number of people during lifts. whereas previous work has demonstrated the chronic effects on adherence to training, or the effects of an audience during a competitive situation. These findings are important because they demonstrate that performance, and therefore training impulse, may be enhanced with the presence of close observers, documenting for the first time that the perceived absence of these individuals has a negative impact on total work performed. The influence of spotters on lifting performance seems to be derivative of social, cognitive, and perceptual variables. So, it's not like the spotter is actually doing something, at least not something physical, but it's largely driven, through some sort of psychological effect, as they say, social, cognitive, and perceptual variables. Specifically through supporting positive self-efficacy toward the task and lower perceptions of effort. In this study, self-efficacy was enhanced with the presence of the spotters, supporting the assertion that the verbal and nonverbal communication from others influences self-efficacy beliefs. Although the spotters do not provide verbal encouragement, their physical behavior explicitly acts on social persuasive mechanisms proposed to support self-efficacy. Their active intervention in the lift indicates a judgment on the limit of the lifter's ability. As such, when the participant is aware of the spotter's non-intervention, this supports the self-efficacy by confirming the belief in their ability to continue. So, I think this is super interesting. If you just have the spotter there, and whatever, they're there, basically doing nothing, whatever, maybe their hands are close to the bar, but they're not actually touching the bar. Just that sort of non-act itself, of hey, they're just there, not doing anything. You get this boost of hey, this person could have intervened, but they didn't intervene because they believed that I could do it. And thus a boost in self-efficacy. You're kind of you are getting the real-time evidence that someone believes in you. And whatever. No surprise to me that, if you get the message across that someone believes in you, you would receive a boost in self-efficacy. This study title is misleading. It's more about working out with people than actually the spotter and his functions. Or her functions. Or their functions. But yeah, I don't disagree. Whatever. Deception is in the title. I don't think they're above being misleading. Just as we have clickbait titles, in whatever mainstream media, totally have clickbait titles in science. If anything, there's some pretty cringe clickbait titles in a lot of scientific articles. Where was I? Yeah, as such. Consequently, participants then invest further effect to improve their performance, which caused greater increases in blood lactate concentrations at the end of the spotter trials. Right, so there's something not only psychological, but something physiological going on that is presumably measurable. Through a biomarker, blood lactate concentrations. A proposed theoretical mechanism to explain these effects is through a relation-inferred self-efficacy, or RISE, that is influenced by verbal and nonverbal behavior. In the present context, Lent and Lopez's conceptual model proposes that RISE is generated through the lifter's perceptions of interpersonal cues from the spotter. By not intervening, this is interpreted as the spotter's confidence in the participant's ability to continue with the exercise. The social cognitive environment within which strength and conditioning training is undertaken is a key consideration when aiming to maximize performance. Right. So again, it really is just someone believes in you. The effect of the mere presence of others on performance, according to social facilitation theory, tends to be weak. However, the nature of the interaction and behavior of the social influence are suggested to be important mediating factors of the social facilitative effect. According to social impact theory, the impact of social presence on emotions and behavior is determined by multiplicative forces, including size, one or more people present, immediacy, such as proximity, and social source strength, at its importance. In this study, when both spotters were visibly present to the participants, they remained in close proximity of the bar throughout the exercise bouts and rest periods. During this period, you pretty much have, your spotter in the standard spotting position. They're up close near the bar. They're like ready to intervene if needed. During this period, the investigator also remained in view, further increasing the number of individuals that were present and reinforcing the importance of the task at the start of each set. Clearly, the behavior of the investigator remained consistent in every trial, so it is perhaps more likely that the factor that seems to have facilitated improvements in performance in spotter conditions are more strongly linked to the number and proximity social forces. Right, so since the investigator is always there, that variable is controlled for. In conditions where the audience or the number of individuals present increases, there is a greater impact on emotions and behavior. Individuals tend to have a pervasive desire to be viewed in a positive light and will engage in impression management behaviors to achieve this. As the presence of people increases, there is an increased tendency to manage these impressions. In this study, the participants all had experience of weight training and may have, therefore, had a greater desire to be perceived as competent in the task, when the researcher and spotters were both visibly present. To manage and satisfy this impression of competency, increase in effort would be a likely strategy and therefore support the findings of a better performance attained in the spotter condition. So it's like you have kind of like two moderating factors on performance, or like this boost in performance. There's like that psychological benefit of like, hey, someone's there to help you, and this person looks like they believe in you. And you also have the aspect of like, since you're like on display, you wanna put on a show, I guess, so to speak. You wanna appear stronger than maybe you actually are. Or really show your true maximal strength. And so, you'll work harder and exert more effort. The proximity of the social presence has also been found to moderate the effect of social size on emotions and behaviors. Partially interactive social influences may have a different effect than non-interactive or active influences. The interaction may be based on verbal, nonverbal communication, or behavior of the social presence. A spotter is suggested to be present in a number of resistance exercise settings and acts as a partially active social influence. Whereas an audience spectator is non-active without direct interaction and can be classed as mere presence. This could explain the greater magnitude of the effect of spotters on performance. About what SEs and ratings of perceived exertion in this study. Subjective effort. They mentioned it. Clearly my memory is going. And in this study versus the smaller or trivial effects previously found in research exploring audience effects. Similar performance improvements have been previously observed in 12-week training program interventions using direct supervision of youth rugby league players and moderately resistance-trained men. Notably, this study suggests that the close proximity of spotters influences the performance of bench press exercise, but the nature and role of the individuals that are present during such activities might also be important in potentially enhancing training impulse. Future studies should therefore investigate the presence of spotters and a wider variety of resistance exercise activities, but more crucially, the nature, behavior, and interaction of the spotter with the athlete and/or client. So what are the practical applications? Improved performance of bench press exercise to failure is mediated by perceptions of spotter presence. Therefore, coaches and exercise professionals should ensure that their athletes or clients perform resistance exercise in the proximity of others, ideally in a spotting role. This is not just because of the potential safety benefits, as you brought up, Bob Marley. Totally, there is that safety aspect, which is super important. But also because this is likely to cause an observable improvement in total work performed which occurs with enhanced self-efficacy and reduced ratings of effort. This has important implications for measurements of exercise capacity, client self-efficacy, and those using this type of exercise protocol as a performance criterion. So yeah, again, to me, super interesting. You know, at least to me, the obvious part is like, you know, when there's an audience, and when there's lots of eyes on you, you know, people will probably be more willing to put in more effort, you know, to kind of like maybe prevent embarrassment, or again, to kind of like put on a show. But what is, I think, less obvious, but not surprising to me, that just the mere presence of someone there, not only someone there, but someone there who believes in you. They're just there, not touching the bar, and them not touching the bar results in a performance boost. You know, I think that's a testament. And not only, you know, us as humans, as social creatures, okay, but also just the power of belief, and the power of feeling supported, or the perceptions of feeling supported, and someone believing in you. Where, you know, I think this extrapolates, you know, outside the gym. Where, you know, I'm generally of whatever, of the position that, you know, you empower people by supporting them. And that, you know, if someone wants to make a positive change, that positive change will likely come through, you know, positive support. And I'll bring in, you know, the past research that I've covered, you know, why I'm so staunchly against things like, you know, fat shaming, or pretty much like shaming in general. Is because like that is not supportive. Where that is disempowering. And I think research like this, even though, you know, this is the context of like just a simple bench press, a Smith machine bench press, of just like having someone present, you know, I would have loved it. You know, they had spotters just physically present, and the spotters, you know, did not touch the bar, and by the spotter not touching the bar, it implicitly sends the message that, hey, I believe that you can lift this weight and you don't need my help. And so that empowers the lifter. I would have loved it. You know, if I was in charge of running this experiment, like you just have the spotter there, and they just have like, you know, like one finger under the bar. Like they are just touching the bar, but they are exerting no force on the bar whatsoever. They're pretty much just like making contact with the bar. And I'd be curious to see if there's any measurable effect on the effort. Where if you're showing here, that would be sort of like my natural follow-up question of like just the presence of the spotter and the spotter doing nothing. The lifter is more willing or more able to exert more effort. So if it holds true that through non-touching of the bar, this results in self-efficacy, or boosts in self-efficacy, and thus they can lift more or put in more effort. Well, to test that hypothesis, at least this is how I would test that hypothesis, but I'm not in this field, so there might be other better ways. But you just literally, you run the same experiment, and you just have the spotter, like, it could just be like literally just like, you know, one finger, they just put their index finger, just making contact with the bar, and you see how that affects the lifter or not. Presumably, my working hypothesis would be that just by them just like making contact with the bar, it just like reduces the self-efficacy. Or like they just have like one hand making contact with the bar, but there is virtually no force, or very, very small upwards force. How does that affect the exertion, or like how much effort they're able to put in? Where again, no surprise to me that even when it comes to the bench press, when someone feels supported, they feel empowered. And them feeling empowered literally results in them being able to put in more effort to kind of like output more power. To me, in my mind, that tracks completely. And I was saying that working out with friends works better the other week. You were questioning me. I don't think I was. I don't think I was ever questioning. I don't think I ever said like you shouldn't work out with your friends. I'm pretty sure, I never said or discouraged you from working out with friends. I think I'm more coming from the place of contrasting it. Of like generally speaking, I'm more of like a solo lifter. But that's just because like I'm pretty focused in the gym. And even though I'm very social at the gym, I know a lot of people at the gym that I interact with. But like kind of like when I'm doing my thing, like I just want to be like kind of like in the zone, so to speak. But maybe, if I want to follow the evidence, right? This evidence is telling me that I might benefit from a spotter. But here's where, again, I'm going to extrapolate this and bring in other research that I've covered. Research that I've covered last week on self-compassion. I preach a lot about self-compassion for a multitude of reasons. More experienced lifters will have worse. That would be my working hypothesis. I don't disagree with that. And I would want to test it with, inexperienced lifters and more experienced lifters. Where like, I can totally foresee, even for myself, if I just have someone there, like, someone there just like touching the bar, me just imagining it, that would have a psychological effect on me. Okay, so Desolate Mirror, even though you say that jokingly, this is why I'm going to be briefly going back to self-compassion, or just bringing in what I've talked about with self-compassion. Where self-compassion, okay, as I covered last week, there appears to be a whole host of potential positive benefits if you're able to practice self-compassion. So let me bring it up a little bit. So there's this one. Yeah. So I covered some of this. I think I covered all of this last week. So I'm obviously not going to, go through the whole thing again. But, as I covered, there's these potential positive benefits of self-compassion. So like, what's going on there? What is the mechanism? To kind of like use my biochemistry language, or like my chemistry language. We're interested in mechanisms. It's not just cause and effect, but like, how is the driving happening? And so, self-compassion may be able to empower you to, make improvements or cultivate healthier habits. As highlighted here in this meta-analysis. Like, what's going on there? What is the mechanism? And as they sort of highlight here, self-kindness entails providing oneself with warmth, support, and understanding, rather than imposing harsh self-judgments. So, it seems like, okay, through self-compassion, you are becoming your own support system, okay? It's highlighted here. Support, providing oneself with warmth and support. So like, obviously there's something to be said for external support. Support from friends, support from family, support from hopefully the people that you care about in your life. But then there's also the support from yourself. Internal support, I guess is how I would term it. Where it's like, okay, you don't always have access, to the people that you care about that are supportive. So is there maybe a substitute for that? And maybe the self-compassion can be a substitute for that. Maybe not as good. I don't know. I don't know if you can tease out the difference between, compassion from other people versus self-compassion, and which one's better, which one's worse. Are they the same? I don't know. But totally, it seems like the mechanism through which self-compassion results in these, positive benefits in, let's say, health behaviors or just healthier habits overall. It's through kind of like your own internal support network of like what you say to yourself, how do you empower yourself, and to me, that makes sense. That's intuitive to me, but understandably definitely not intuitive to everyone, because there are still people out there that advocate for shaming, fat shaming, etc., etc. And there are many people still out there, unfortunately, that think that shaming is a good way to get people to change or alter their behavior, even though the research is quite clear that it's not, and that shame, I would say, only has utility in some like very niche instances. I would say typically in the realm of like moral transgressions. But when it comes to like health behaviors, shame does not seem to be a good motivator at all. And if anything, more of a sabotager. And so going back to this, again, no surprise to me. This is why I would I might be making way too much of a leap. I will gladly concede that. But totally, it tracks in my mind that, through this, through the presence of the spotter, you're getting a psychological effect of like, this is pretty much as a direct of a supportive environment as you can get. Of like literally, they are attempting to support you during a lift. This is physical support. But like the physical support is like coming through like a psychological mechanism of like this boost in self-efficacy of like, hey, you pretty much have this person implicitly sending the message of like, hey, you can do it. You can lift this weight. And so, and this maybe just occurred to me, actually. Because they mentioned that it's 11 out of 12 that got this boost. There was an outlier. I want to go back to it. Subjects, I think it was, oh yeah, it was certainly in the results. Or like in the beginning of the discussion. Yeah, 11 of the 12. So interestingly, 11 of the 12. Were pretty much, okay, so to me, that's almost like the most interesting. Like this is, whatever, 95, greater than 90% of the sample, small sample. But pretty much virtually everyone, literally except one, got this performance boost. And this one person, they performed the same throughout the different experiments. Oh, Noda Bud, welcome. Always happy to see you. Hope you're doing well. And I hope, we got crazy weather here in Quebec, and I think you got some in your neck of the woods. I'm hoping that everything turned out well for you and the people you care about. But yeah, this basically, that it seems like that one person, like they were consistent in performance. It seems like they didn't need, the spotter. Yeah, it's like, I'm thinking out loud, but maybe, okay, what if like this is the one person that is like they didn't need the spotter, the external spotter, because like they were practicing self-compassion. or like they're better able to provide more internal support for themselves. They don't need the spotter to be like, hey, you can do it, because they're doing that themselves. Where it's like, yeah, maybe that one person who's the outlier, the one that didn't get the performance boost, they were just like consistent in their performance. Presumably, it seems like they didn't have much of a problem of like getting the 1 rep max. Of like maybe in every condition, like they were able to achieve their full 1 rep max because they're good at supporting themselves and they don't need that external support. And so in the presence of the external support, it does nothing. I'm literally just speculating. No. I'm not saying like this is what is actually occurring. I'm just like throwing out a hypothesis. But it, that one outlier is like the most interesting to me. 100%. You might be that's why I have no problem conceding that I am just thinking out loud, and I have no idea what's going on with that one person. But I would want to take that one person and run more tests. Oh yeah, 100%. I touched upon that earlier when we were going through the methodology. Of like, they got them to ensure that they drank, 1 liter of water a couple hours before testing. And no food within 2 hours. But I mean, at the end of the day, like you can't really, you can, but you're probably gonna have a really hard time, as I'm sure you know as well as I do, recruiting a group of people where it's like, sleep is enforced, nutrition is enforced, and nutrient timing is enforced. Where, as interesting to me as this study is, I fully recognize that, there's some clear limitations. This is 12 recreationally trained male participants. Only male, small sample size, on the Smith machine, right? So not an actual bench press. You will definitely find people that they will never say that using a Smith machine is a bench press, and that the bench press is only a free barbell. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think this research is so interesting. I think this is, I would love it if there are, way more follow-up studies, larger sample size, more things controlled for, etc., etc. Where I think this is a good testament of like how we humans can thrive in supportive environments, and that supportive environments are virtually always better than unsupportive, or whatever the opposite end of unsupportive. Where I think, this is just my opinion, I think this is like virtually, arguably, human nature. Of like, we require support to flourish. We require support to feel empowered. Whether that support is coming externally, from other people, or from ourselves through self-compassion, or whatever, some other factors. I recognize that by multiple mechanisms or multiple ways to be internally supportive to yourself other than self-compassion. But I think self-compassion is probably like one of the more accessible ways, in my opinion. So that's why I extrapolate this research, whether correctly or not, to outside the gym. Or rather, no surprise to me that of what we know of the psychological research outside the gym, in terms of providing support, in terms of self-compassion, no surprise to me that it can translate to inside the gym. And on that topic, that also seems to be a problem with these exercise studies. Typically, those variables will sort of be controlled for automatically with a large sample. Sample is random, but with a small sample, you need to control for all that stuff. Well, yeah, so, I mean, this is like the huge challenge in doing any sort of like exercise science study. It's like virtually impossible. Control for, not virtually, it is impossible to control for all the variables in studies like these, especially studies when it comes to like, you know, whatever biomechanics and exercises and nutrition. Like, unless like you're locking people in a lab and, you know, you are feeding them, you know, a specified diet, and, you know, you're ensuring that, you know, they're sleeping X amount of time, etc., etc. And even then, you know, you can't really control for a genetic background either, right? Unless we start working with clones and all that stuff. And maybe that's somewhere down the pipeline. But, you know, like, even things like this. Let's see. You know, I have quite a few studies on, you know, exercise form and technique, and, you know, the back squat. And, you know, whatever. I'm highly confident. I might be unfounded confidence. But, you know, I'm confident that, at the very least, I maybe don't know the optimal, you know, the perfectly optimal squat. But I do know safe in terms, or rather the range of safety. I have really good idea of like when you are getting into the unsafe territory, and, you know, what is the optimal squat. That I would say that's still technically an open question in exercise science. And, you know, what is optimal, right? It depends on what you're training for. As I said before, you know, the muscles activated during, you know, the barbell back squat, you know, depends on multiple variables, and one of them is depth. Where, you know, depending on the depth of the squat that you go to, certain muscles are activated, you know, more activated than others. But, you know, when it comes to like biomechanical exercises like these, like, you know, even something as simple as like foot placement. You know, where should your feet be placed in the barbell back squat? You know, we can't make any universal recommendations. We haven't literally tested like every single foot position or stance, and you pretty much like can't do that because like if you're going to be working with humans, everyone's going to have like their own unique, you know, physiology, etc., etc. And I mean, same thing with like the bench press, where it's like, you know, there's something to be said for incline bench, but like, you know, what's the perfect angle? You know, we haven't gone through every study of like, okay, bench at, you know, 90 degrees, then bench at 91 degrees, or, you know, 90.1, 90.2, all the way, you know, you have infinite number of angles, technically, so to speak, between, you know, 90 degrees, or whatever, flat and 90 degrees. And so, yeah, we will almost never have perfect answers to these questions. I feel like there's so many open questions next time. That seems easy enough to study. Well, what questions do you think are easy? I just kind of like went on a rant. Like, these are hard questions to answer. But what are you classifying as the easy question? I guess is what I'd be curious about. Because I would say these are actually difficult questions, at least based off what I went through. Like, you know, trying to find like the perfect squat. There's like an infinite number of variables that you have to test through. Even just something as simple as like, you know, where do you position your hands during the squat? Where on the back? You know, foot placement, etc., etc. So many, bar path and depth. So, but on the topic of, or expanding out of self-compassion, but still sort of in the same vein, is pretty much the second topic of the stream. Of like, last week and a few weeks prior, I went over pretty in-depthly some self-compassion research and why I think it's important. And now, so many people, and even myself included, can struggle with long-term goals. I think that's almost a universal human experience. Always trying to like balance short-term versus long-term goals. Of like you taking the example of diet. You have the short-term goal of like eating foods that you enjoy, but very often eating the foods that you enjoy not necessarily fully compatible with the long-term goals of either losing weight, gaining muscle, or just leading a healthier lifestyle overall. So and that falls in the category of temporal discounting, basically. Essentially kind of like managing, short-term and long-term goals. And generally speaking, the better you are able to temporally discount, the better you are able to like manage your long-term goals, or generally speaking, pursue your long-term goals, and not be, let's say, sidetracked with your short-term. And so like what accounts for temporal discounting, or what can allow someone to temporally discount? The typical experiment that I think most people are familiar with at this point is like the classic marshmallow experiment. Like that's sort of like your classical temporal discounting experiment. Like you take a group of children, and with some marshmallows, you put 2 marshmallows in front of them, and you can say, well, you can either have 1 marshmallow now, or if you wait like 5-10 minutes, can't remember the time, then you could have 2 marshmallows in like 5-10 minutes. And then you see, some children can wait the 5-10 minutes, no problem. Others, they can't wait at all and they just want that marshmallow now. And this, this marshmallow, pretty infamous marshmallow experiment, does appear to have like some predictive power. It's not perfect, definitely not perfect, but there definitely appears to be some association in terms of like one's ability, or a child's ability, to wait and get 2 marshmallows, and their downstream academic performance. Of like, generally speaking, if I remember the data correctly, the children that were better able to wait the allotted time to get that 2 marshmallows, they performed better academically down the road. And so that is kind of like your classic temporal discounting experiment. And I would say that's temporal discounting in a nutshell. And many people, even myself included, I think most people want to be in a better position to temporally discount. I think most people's goals that are the most meaningful to them are like long-term goals. Be healthier, lose weight, whatever. Complete university, find a better job, learn a new skill, or just learn something new, period. Those types of goals, long-term goals, you need to engage in some sort of temporal discounting, usually accomplish them. And so, Is gratitude a way, or rather, maybe to answer the question, practicing gratitude appears to be a way to increase your ability to engage in temporal discounting. For example, the other day I was looking for optimal protein intake per meal. There is no good study on it, or even things that are research, such as amount sets per week, have so many open questions. Like, yeah, those are totally open questions. And even now, there's a decent amount of research on protein intake, and even then, like kind of a decent amount of research, we still give a range, right? Like depending on your activity level, and your training levels, like whatever between this number and this number is like your optimal protein intake. Now we haven't narrowed it down to like, this is the optimal protein intake for you, because these are difficult things to study. So, the predominant view of self-control identifies emotion as the bane of patience. Affective, hot responses must be suppressed, or at a minimum, ignored if individuals are to resist temptations for immediate gratification. Right. So yeah, this falls in the vein of self-control. And, many people, kind of like view self-control as kind of like your ability to just kind of like, grit through it, and just like, suppress or deny your emotions. When I would say, at least based off of the research that I have gone into, like it's almost the opposite is true. Of like, want to improve your self-control, you probably want to engage with your emotions even more. Where it seems like self-control and discipline, these are emotional processes. And if you can't engage with your emotions, you will likely struggle with some aspect of self-control or discipline. And this researcher here, David DeSteno, this appears to be kind of like their area of research or expertise. They have written, I think, multiple books. Yeah. Emotional success. I've read this book. This is one of the reasons why I cover research like this. Because whatever, I know this researcher. And I would say this is a pretty good book. I'd recommend it. And it makes a great case as to why these types of emotions, or how, let's say, you can channel these emotions or harness them for positive benefits. So, although at times this view correctly captures the dynamics underlying self-control, the identification of emotions solely as an inhibitor of patience or perseverance is likely erroneous. That is, although certain emotions can underlie cravings for immediate gratification, others should foster patience if emotions serve as adaptive mechanisms for social life. Gratitude, the positive state one feels when another has intentionally given or attempted to give one something of value, has recently been identified as a candidate emotion that supports self-control. And it's like, this is definitely not, or was not intuitive to me. I definitely had no idea that there was any link between gratitude and self-control. One moment. One second. Where for myself, okay, before this research came to my attention, I did practice gratitude. uh, where, I've been practicing mindfulness meditation quite a while, and a lot of mindfulness meditation, let's say sessions, focus on gratitude, just as they focus on self-compassion. And even before I started mindfulness meditation, I did practice some gratitude, because it's actually built in to Stoic philosophy, and I've read quite a bit of it. And they don't explicitly talk about gratitude per se, but they do sort of advocate for, let's say, taking stock, or like, as they would kind of like term it, or as it's been translated, as like negative visualization, of like, hey, you should enjoy this present moment now, because like it can be taken away from you at a moment's notice. And so, I've been practicing gratitude for a while, without actually knowing that it had any sort of psychological benefit. It was just kind of just intuitively felt like a good thing to do. Just as, as much as I can complain, for sure, at the end of the day, I do recognize I was born in Canada, and I am lucky, or I feel lucky, born in Canada, and I had no control over that. There's a decent amount of research on protein intake per day, although variables such as lifting experience or bulk cut are under study. But in terms of protein per meal, the research essentially extrapolates from research, which they have 80 grams of fat. Yeah, 100%. And okay. Where, yeah, protein per meal, especially when it comes to, like, there's a reason why this research doesn't exist. There's multiple good reasons. One of them is like, a lot of nutrient absorption, or the research about nutrient absorption, is done through animals, like pigs, and let's just say, these pigs are not treated very well in this type of research. And to carry out research, nutrient absorption research in humans, you'd have to do, you basically, I don't think you could ethically do it, since you kind of would have to really modify this human in not good ways, and so that's why you are probably not going to find good research about nutrient absorption that is actually applicable to humans, unfortunately. I'm like, yeah, what is kind of like the optimal amount of protein per meal? Open question. What I would say is like, I definitely want to dispel the notion, because I hear this more often than I would like, of like some people making the claim that, oh, you can only absorb 20 grams of protein per meal, or each time that you eat. That is absolutely not true at all, and that is just like a ridiculous notion to have, where it's like 20 or 40 grams, where it's like, yeah, you can't absorb more than 40 grams, whatever, can't remember, at a time, and that is just like ridiculous. That's just like, yeah. I'm certainly, whatever, not any world-renowned expert in nutrition research, or like, human digestion, but I know enough about biochemistry and how our metabolism works that like you're only able to absorb whatever 20, 30, 40 grams at a time. Just absolutely ridiculous. And yet that one drives me nuts too, and I hear it like pretty often. Like, almost frustratingly so. Like I pretty much just like, I don't face palm to this person's face, but just like internally, and it was like, internal cringe for sure. Where was I? Yes. Given its established ability to nurture the development and maintenance of social relationships through its encouragement of costly reciprocal responses, its links to more basic facets of self-control make a good sense. After all, the success of relationships often depends upon a willingness to accept short-term costs in the form of aiding others in order to accrue longer-term gains, social capital. As is well recognized, impatience often stems from the human mind's tendency to overly devalue the benefits offered by future rewards relative to immediate ones, a phenomenon known as temporal discounting. Although processes involving executive function can be used to counter discounting-induced preferences favoring short-term satisfaction, our previous work revealed that inducing feelings of gratitude could similarly combat temptations for immediate reward. That is, an experimental induction of gratitude was shown to reliably attenuate temporal discounting. That is, like, make better your ability to temporally discount, thereby identifying gratitude as an emotional mechanism that can foster, as opposed to inhibit, self-control. Often of import. What's wrong with my reading tonight? This work also demonstrated that the effect of gratitude was differentiable from that of the related positive state of happiness, thus confirming that positive affect in general is not sufficient to enhance patience, right? So it's not just like good mood, or like positive emotions, as they're kind of alluding to here. Like, this is like specific to the feelings of gratitude. Couldn't you just use muscle gains as the dependent variable? So a guy eats 2 meals to get their protein, a guy eats 4 meals, and another one 6 meals. They follow a standardized workout plan. At the end, you see whether there was no... I think... Like, just imagine there's so many confounding variables. Obviously, I understand. You know, you can't fully flesh out the experimental methodology. But even just here, and also again, you couldn't, but ideally you'd want to control for a genetic background, right? So ideally, you want a set of humans, you know, that are genetically identical. This is one of the reasons why we use mice or other animal models, because usually the mice used in research, they're like one genetic line of mice, where it's like, you know, that is kind of like the pro and con of, like, mice are not humans, so like you pretty much can never I would say you can never make that leap from mice to humans in application, but you get the advantage of, like, hey, these mice, the genetic background is all the same. And so, you know, got that going for me. Different species, all the same. But yeah, even here, I think that's, unless, like, you're locking up these people, in a lab for an extended period of time, don't think that would allow you to answer the question. I don't think. Yeah, you're almost on the, yeah, going back to genetic background, you are likely correct. I don't think there's one optimal way. I think we know enough now to make some general recommendations, of, like, you know, generally speaking, more plant-based seems to be healthier, and at the very least, you know, moderate your red meat intake, and then, you know, the closer to 0 in alcohol consumption, the better. Those are kind of like, off the top of my head, kind of like the best sort of like universal guiding principle that I can come up with when it comes to diet. Yeah, but with sufficient sample size, wouldn't the backgrounds of the groups average? No, I don't think so. Because at the end of the day, you have so many different ethnicities. I don't know that they would average out. No, I'm not a geneticist, even though I've taken quite a few advanced genetics. Don't think it would have that effect. Unless you're saying like you isolate it, of like, well, going back to what I covered earlier, regards to sleep. Of like, they had a sample size of a few thousand people. I think it was like 5,000. But it was all from Czech Republic. And so probably, pretty genetically similar. And that would probably average out. But then, you likely couldn't necessarily extrapolate other populations that might be genetically distinct or have, some small genetic difference. The linking of gratitude to increased patience in an experimental context raises an intriguing question. Do individuals who experience heightened gratitude during daily life demonstrate greater self-control in the form of decreased temporal discounting? Given past work, linking naturally occurring negative states such as anxiety and fear to decreased self-control, it might well be the case that naturally occurring gratitude could be associated with the opposite. For example, just as increased distress has been associated with overeating, and I would say this is an often overlooked aspect of eating, where, and here is where I think we think of people as rational agents. And this is just my opinion, maybe my irrational opinion, but I think at our core, we are not rational agents. And that, we just think that, if we provide, information about healthy food, that people would just naturally consume the healthy food. Same thing with our approach. I mean, I would say this is pretty much literally one of the approaches we took when it comes to cigarette smoking. Where, those graphic warning labels, if we just scare people enough, it'll stop people from consuming cigarettes. Because, it's just rational. And yet, the research on graphic warning labels on cigarettes, really not that great. At most, it seems like graphic warning labels on cigarettes might be good at preventing someone from starting smoking, but the graphic warnings on cigarettes doesn't appear to actually translate into people changing their behavior and actually quitting smoking. All it seems to do is just get them to say that they want to quit smoking, but they don't actually do it. Where, yeah, I think most people, at the very least, even myself included, know what it's like to stress eat. And that when we're stressed, we want sources of comfort. And, understandably, even for myself included, food absolutely can and is a source of comfort. Relapse of cigarette use. Naturally occurring gratitude might be associated with greater patience in the face of temptation. The present study examined this possibility and consisted of 3 distinct phases: a laboratory induction of gratitude, measurement of naturally occurring gratitude over a 3-week period, and a final measure of temporal discounting. Our primary prediction was that increased mean levels of gratitude, as opposed to happiness in daily life, would be associated with enhanced financial patience. Moreover, to increase confidence in the validity of gratitude measures obtained outside the lab, we had all participants complete a well-validated lab-based gratitude induction. We expected that, all else being equal, individuals who responded with elevated gratitude to the standardized induction should also demonstrate elevated gratitude levels in response to elicitors experienced in their normal environs. If true, this finding would not only speak to the reliability of the external daily measures of gratitude, but be among the first to demonstrate concordance between one-off lab-based and experience sampling measures of gratitude, a finding that would be useful to gratitude research in its own right. So like, yeah, like at the time, kind of like somewhat groundbreaking research, or like really novel research. I think this is published like, yeah, 2016-ish, or exactly 20. So, you know, it's not super old, but it is, at least to me, somewhat surprising that kind of like this question is like only being asked or answered. And they're, as they're saying here, towards the end of the intro, they're like trying to connect kind of like two experiences of gratitude. As they say here, the one-off lab-based, so, you know, and that's, again, trade-offs when it comes to research. Of like, you know, you can bring people into a lab, right? But as soon as you bring people into a lab, you know, that is a very specific setting. And sure, you have control of more variables in a lab-based setting. But then, you know, technically speaking, it's only applicable to a lab-based setting. And therefore may not actually track the real world. As in, like, you know, does gratitude in the lab actually act and look the same as gratitude in the real world? Those are technically open questions. And it seems like that they're trying to answer that question. Of like, they have experience sampling measures of gratitude. Okay. Where kind of like in the vein of self-reported gratitude. But that is not the same as like actually inducing gratitude in a person. You might just be tracking people that just like, for whatever reason, you know, they express more gratitude in their daily life as they experience life. But that's not the same as like, you know, taking a group of people, inducing gratitude in them, and then seeing what the effects are, if any. So they're like trying to bridge that gap between, you know, what they're observing or what they appear to be observing in the real world, and then like inducing it in a lab, where they can control more variables, or they can rather isolate more variables. So it's a total of 126 participants. Well, those further in-depth individualized things later, but we don't even have the generalized research. Yeah, that's fair. But, I guess the question that I would ask, of the experiment that you're talking about, going off of what I just said, would you want this, this diet research, to take place in a lab, or in the real world? Where it's like you're controlling what these people eat, or you're just gonna go by what these people are reporting to eat. Or there's also the alternative of, this has been done when it comes to diet research in my own condition, Crohn's disease. There's, you know, understandably, there's quite a few diet studies when it comes to Crohn's disease. And one of the things that they do is, you know, to test out certain diets, they just send people food, which is pretty common these days, of like those meal prep kits. Yeah, I figured that's what you would. But then, okay, here's where it gets super tricky. Even if you're sending them prepackaged meals, do you know that they're eating those? How do you know that they're following it? You can send all the food, but that doesn't stop them. You know, we hope that people are honest, and we do rely on people being honest. And I think, generally speaking, for the most part, people are honest. But we do know what happens. This is a thing in research. Like, yeah, you can send them the food, and you know, when they come in to be assessed, you be like, yeah, I ate all the food. You know, I didn't deviate from the study protocol. Turns out they did. We actually know this also from pharmaceutical research, where, you know, when conducting studies on pharmaceutical therapies, you know, one way that is carried out, okay, it totally happens where it's like, okay, we want to test this drug and we'll give people whatever the pills, okay, and then you know, whatever, they go home, and, you know, they are presumably taking the pills, and then they come back and they say, oh yeah, I took all the pills, or like I filled all the prescriptions, whatnot. But then if you go in like their insurance records, like it shows that like, oh, they're not filling this prescription. Like we prescribed this to them, and they said that they're taking this medication, and yet, no, there's no insurance claim. It's not a lot of people, but there are people that unfortunately will lie to researchers, and lie for no real conceivable reason other than they're trying to save face. Like there's not going to be they're not going to be arrested if they're honest and be like, hey, yeah, I didn't take the medication, I didn't fill the prescription. Same thing with your diet study. No, they're not going to be arrested if they don't follow, if they don't eat the prepackaged meals. And yet, some people, there will be a minority of people that will lie and be like, yeah, I followed the study protocol. You know, I ate those meals, and I didn't. And I would say that, you know, kind of like further testament, kind of like how much we are social. It doesn't stop them, but I guess you'd hope that the people across the groups that would cancel out, or if someone is gaining or losing a weird amount of weight. Yeah, you hope. I don't know if you can count on that. But yeah, you know, they're, in principle, what you're outlining, I would say, totally has utility. And may very well be worth doing. But I would say very, very far from like the perfect study. But also at the same time, I'm not expecting you to outline the perfect methodology for a diet study. Yeah, 126 participants recruited from the Northeastern University undergraduate participant pool, and flyers posted across campus took part in this study. So, you know, this is something to keep in mind. This is a very specific sample population, you know, pretty typical of psychological research. You know, they basically recruit from the psychology department at the university where they're located. You know, this is a common flaw in a lot of psychological research. And, you know, very often, as highlighted here, just as they're recruiting from the psychology department, the undergraduates from the psychology department, which is composed of mostly women, then you get largely women participating in these studies. Whereas, yeah, of 105, 79 were women. You have about 80, almost exactly 80% of the sample is women. But, you know, only so much you can extrapolate. All participants gave informed consent before participating. Participants were either compensated monetarily for both their lab visit and 3-week study period, or were given course credit for the lab visit and then paid for the 3-week study period. But, you know, I don't think there's a good reason, let's say, you know, to make the claim that, oh, whatever, and since mostly women, you know, not applicable. I think there's every reason to think that whatever they're finding here is probably extrapolatable. So, 3 phases. Phase 1 involved the use of a confederate and an in vivo gratitude induction. Phase 2 involved a 3-week period during which gratitude and happiness were assessed during daily internet-based questionnaires. Phase 3 involved completion of an economic temporal discounting measure. Probably, aside from the stats, might be your favorite part, Bob Marley. The economic temporal discounting measure. Which I'm certain there's probably something, there's an equal concept in economics, but they probably don't call it temporal discounting. I'm curious if you know what they would call it in economics. Kind of like, the ability to, delay gratification for, long-term gratification. Or, gratification down the road. Participants were run individually. Each was paired with a female Confederate trained to follow a scripted procedure to induce gratitude. The pair was brought into the lab for a study ostensibly about problem solving in team, seated at computers next to each other, and given instructions and consent forms. The two next completed a 5-minute general knowledge task together in which they attempted to answer general trivia questions to receive a joint score. This task was administered solely to uphold the cover story and legitimize emotional manipulation checks to be completed later on. After this task, the participant and Confederate received instructions for a lexical decision task and questionnaire to be completed individually at their own computers. This lexical decision task, this is a small thing. I guess a little bit of redundancy here, but easy to overlook. This lexical decision task was designed to be tedious and repetitive. Participants had to repeatedly decide whether strings of letters appearing on a computer screen were English words. After working for 10 minutes on this task, the participant's computer was rigged to appear to short circuit and go black. Meanwhile, the Confederate, who appeared to have finished her tasks, stood up and started to leave the room. When she noticed that the participant was having a computer issue, she then volunteered to get the experimenter. On entering the room, the experimenter explained that this malfunction had happened before, and that she would have to call a technician to come fix the computer, after which the participant would need to start the onerous task over from the beginning. Seems like, they're basically trying to induce, kind of like a mild state of frustration, or I guess, maybe more specific, impatience, of like, they're assigned a task that is designed to be challenging, and then like their computer malfunctions, and then they gotta do the task again, or like there's the choice to do the task again. Do you have the patience to start from scratch, even though you already went through this kind of like frustrating process? Okay, they also call it time preference, or relating to money liquidity preference. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Although, I understand why they would call it time preference. Yeah, I would say that's kind of like poor terminology. I prefer later versus now. That's my time preference. But yeah, I do think temporal discounting is probably the more appropriate. Sounds way more sophisticated. Time preference. After the experimenter left to ostensibly make that phone call, the Confederate stayed behind to help the participant determine what had happened with the computer. Following a scripted set of comments and behaviors, the Confederate hit a key that, after a 30-second delay, was programmed to bring the computer screen back to normal. The computer appeared to be fixed as the Confederate was tightening loose cords, making it seem as though the Confederate was responsible for solving the problem, thereby saving the participant from having to redo the tedious task. The experimenter then told the participant that they could continue with the next questionnaire. So like this is clearly really staged event, where they literally have an actor, doing stuff, making stuff up. After this episode, participants completed a number of questions on the computer, including an affective state measure, which included measures of gratitude and happiness, filler items, and demographic information, using a 7-point Likert scale, very common in psychological research, which is like, just 1 not at all to 7 extremely likely. Participants identified how well different emotion descriptors represented their current emotional state, as well as feelings toward their general knowledge partner, Confederate. Gratitude was assessed as the mean response to 2 questions. How grateful, appreciative do you feel towards your partner on the general knowledge task? Happiness was assessed by responses to the question, how happy do you feel? Once all questions were completed, the lab session appeared to come to a phase 2 over the course of 3 weeks following the day of the initial participation. Participants' emotional states were assessed through completion of daily online questionnaire. Specifically, we assessed gratitude and happiness using the Qualtrics platform to send short online questionnaires to participants every evening, which could be completed via smartphone or computer. On these questionnaires, participants reported the intensities of various emotional states they had experienced during the past 24 hours. Any participant failing to complete 3 or more of the 7 surveys per week was dropped from the study. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, if you're not getting good data collection, you definitely should reject from the study. Late surveys were counted as misses. And this is another challenge when it comes to research like this, of just getting people to complete it, from beginning to end as it's designed. Similar to the lab-based measure, gratitude was assessed based on responses to 2 questions. How grateful, appreciative have you felt in the last 24 hours? Happiness was assessed based on the response to how happy have you felt in the last 24 hours. Both measures utilized a 7-point scale ranging from not at all to 7 extremely likely. Note that given the relative infrequency of feeling gratitude at any given moment compared with feeling more basic states like happiness or sadness, we utilize this daily reflection measure rather than a randomly timed experience sampling methodology in which states would be assessed at any given moment. The day following completion of the 3-week measurement period, participants were given instructions to complete a standard temporal discounting task online. The task had to be completed within 48 hours of receiving the instructions. Following procedures from, the research, from previous research carried out by David DeSteno, so the head researcher of this article, or rather of this scientific study, not an article. A programming error resulted in one of the questions being omitted. Consequently, data from the remaining 26 were used to calculate individual discounting scores. In order to motivate participants to report their true preferences, we informed them that one person each week would be randomly selected to receive one of his or her monetary choices. That is, if they indicated a preference for immediate cash, they would be paid at the time of selection. If they indicated a preference for a future reward, they would be paid at that time. Right. So, they're basically trying to induce gratitude. They're tracking gratitude over time during that 3-week period, and it seems like they are measuring their ability to engage in temporal discounting after kind of a gratitude intervention, so to speak. Oh, I missed this part. Yeah. The day following completion of the 3-week measurement period, participants were given instructions to complete a standard temporal discounting task online. The task had to be completed within 48 hours. Guided participants complete a series of questions, taking the form of, would you rather have X now or Y dollars in days, with Y always exceeding X, and Z varying over days to months. That is, people were required to choose whether they would rather receive a smaller reward immediately. So basically, this is just the marshmallow test for adults. It's just, instead of marshmallows, you got money. Ranging from $11 to $80, or a larger reward in the future, ranging from $25 to $85. In this way, this financial choice measure constitutes something of an adult version of the marshmallow test. It allows determination not only of whether individuals can resist immediate temptation, but also of the degree of devaluation of future rewards. And a lot of the studies about temporal discounting, I think are pretty interesting. Of like, what is someone's tipping point? Of like, when you ask them, do you want $50 now, or do you want $100 next week? I think virtually everyone can wait a week for an extra $50. But then, it's, to me, it's totally interesting. Of like, a month out, 6 months out, 10 years from now, I think it's fair to say no one would wait 10 years for an extra $50. But it's super interesting, kind of like how for each person, like their threshold appears to be pretty unique, of like what brings you over, in terms of like your unique temporal discounting, at least when it comes to money. Obviously, it's probably different. Change the reward, but do you want $50 now, or like $200 in months? I think it becomes gray, or you get kind of like a mixed bag of responses. So summarizing the results, I guess this study is short enough. I can go through it pretty much from beginning to end. Before examining the relation, if any, between average gratitude intensities in daily life and financial patience, thought to determine whether a systematic relation existed between gratitude responses in the lab and mean levels of gratitude in participants' natural environs. The logic here was that individual differences in gratitude in response to a standardized eliciting condition could positively co-vary with individual differences in reported gratitude in participants' daily life. Right. So, as long as we're on the same page, time preference not as fancy as temporal discounting. I don't think you can sound like a scientist if you say time preference over temporal discounting. Or any scientist that prefers time preference over temporal discounting. Not a scientist. But like, yeah, so through that kind of like computer task, with the simulated computer failure and then the simulated computer recovery, they try to induce a state of gratitude in the person. And then they had that follow-up question. Once they had that induced state of gratitude, they measured, or at least they tried to get a measure, their actual gratitude. And then now they're trying to see how it correlates to how they kind of like, how grateful do they feel in their daily lives? And then through that, how are they able to engage in temporal discounting? Through like, their little money scheme that they outline here. So yeah, if true, it will lend empirical support to the validity of the repeated external measures. That is, assuming a fairly random distribution of gratitude eliciting events in participants' daily lives, those who responded with more intense gratitude to the lab-based measure could also respond more intensely to gratitude eliciting conditions that naturally occur. To the extent that a strong predictive relation exists between the lab-based and daily life-based measure of gratitude, we can be certain that both are picking up on valid tendencies to experience this discrete positive emotion under appropriate eliciting conditions. To examine this hypothesis, we analyzed participants' daily gratitude levels using a random intercepts multi-level model in which daily gratitude at level 1 was nested within individuals at level 2. The following equations denote the model. I'm not a gratitude or psychological researcher, so I can't dissect those formulas. Equation 1 represents daily gratitude intensities for a given participant. This other symbol represents the mean gratitude. Yeah, they're going over how they're analyzing. Having demonstrated consistency in gratitude responses under controlled and real-world conditions, we next sought to examine whether those who experienced more intense gratitude in their daily lives also demonstrated decreased temporal discounting, and thereby increased self-control in the face of financial temptation. To do this, we used maximum likelihood estimation to fit each participant's financial choices to an exponential discounting function, in which larger values of sigma, if I remember my Greek symbols correctly. Whoopsie. Or no, that's not. Either way, doesn't matter. Greek symbol. Indicate less discounting and thus more patience. As an annual discount factor reflects the degree to which a fixed amount to be received 1 year from now would be valued relative to the same amount received immediately. In other words, a discount factor of 0.4 would imply that $100 today is perceived as worth only $40 in 1 year's time. Put differently, it means one would be willing to accept $40 today as opposed to $100 a year from now. As such, the discount factor can range from 0, extreme impatience, 1, extreme patience. Right. Like they are essentially running that experiment. Like, do you want, $40 now, or do you want $100 a year from now? Or, what is the dollar value that will allow you wait a year? $40 now or $200 a year from now. I don't even know what my tipping point would be. Probably around like $500, something like that. We next regress participants' discount factors on their mean gratitude levels during the 3-week period. As anticipated, increased mean levels of gratitude were associated with greater patience. That is, increased annual discount factor. As shown in this figure, figure 1, participants whose mean gratitude levels in daily life were 1 standard deviation below the mean would require only $21 now to forego $100 in years' time. However, those experiencing gratitude at greater levels, that is, 1 standard deviation above the mean, showed greater patience. They would require $33 to forego the $100 reward a year from now, thereby evidencing decreased discounting. So they're referring to figure 1, more downwards. Figure 1. Predicted annual discount factors as a function of mean 3-week gratitude levels, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. Error bars denote plus or minus 1 standard error. See the online article for the color version of this figure. Yeah, so